Welcome to the Making Schools Work podcast, a podcast for everyone in education. This show is brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. At SREB, we believe that every school has the potential to be great. Whatever you do in the school, whatever your job may be, let's talk about things that make schools work.
Welcome to the Making Schools Work podcast. I'm Daniel Rock, the Senior Instructional Coach at SREB. And today I'm joined by Jason Adair, our Director of Curriculum Instruction. How are you, Jason?
Thanks for having me here.
Glad. Every year at our coaching conference, there's one session that is always jam-packed. We have to run around and pull in chairs because there's so many people. And that's always Becca Silver's session. Yeah. She runs the Whole Educator company. It's a website, it's a podcast, it's a multi-dimensional approach to sharing what she has to learn. Jason, you've gotten to know her. So can you introduce us to Becca Silver, our guest today, and tell us a little bit about her?
Yeah, I got to know Becca 3 years ago. She spoke at our conference. A group of us went to Hop Dottie's in Atlanta, and we just clicked. And she works with instructional coaches, school leaders, district leaders. Before that, she was a classroom teacher. She works with schools where their initiatives are stalling, they're losing momentum, having this constant effort just to keep moving forward. And she digs in and works with them. One of the places where we clicked more than anything is working with resistant teachers, resistant leaders, resistant coaches. This is one of the major issues that we have as coaches, as leaders, as teachers that just dig their heels in and say, I know everything. I don't need coaching. I don't need anything.
As husbands, as fathers,
everything,
as
right?
Friends. That sounds, yeah.
Yeah. So we have her coming to our conference again this year to present on the Catalyst Mindset Framework. But more than anything, we wanted to bring her in today to chat with us about breaking through resistance.
Welcome, Becca Silver. If I were to ask 100 coaches, what is it that you want help with? Help me with working with resistant teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So you say that's a misdiagnosis. Can you explain what you mean by that? Why is just saying I want help with resistant teachers a misdiagnosis?
So there's a couple pieces there. One thing is I actually don't say resistant teachers. I say teachers experiencing resistance.
Okay.
Because when we call people resistant, you are a resistant teacher, right? We're kind of labeling.
Yeah.
And when we label people, we keep them stuck in our mind, the very place we don't want them to. We don't want them to stay resistant, right? And so one thing that I've talked a lot about the last few years is when we see it as an experience, instead of this is who they are, we give them a chance to shift out of it, right? And it starts with our own mindset first. And I equate it to like happiness or sadness. I'm not a happy person. And I'm also not a sad person. I experience happiness and I experience sadness. It moves through me. Resistance is the same way. Resistance moves through us. And what happens in school is we misdiagnose resistance and we think about it often as a compliance issue. We don't realize it, by the way. This is all subconscious, right? We see it as more of a compliance issue. So when we think of it as that, we start using compliance strategies. How do I get them to do it? And the misdiagnosis is that we don't want to be using compliance strategies for a human problem, right? For people grappling with their own humanity.
We don't want to use compliance strategies for a people problem.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. One thing I just want to name is we all experience resistance. Everyone here in this podcast right now, we all experience resistance. We resist people, we resist things, we resist doing our taxes, we resist that weird family member. We resist people and things, right? And so our humans that we are supporting are experiencing resistance to changes they didn't choose. Right. And I talk about this in my session too. So those folks that are listening, you will say this often. We hire critical thinkers. We don't want people that have to be given the directions and just follow it. And then we hire critical thinkers and then ask them to change in ways that they didn't choose. And sometimes that grappling with that change looks like resistance. And I like to put it up against compliance. Compliance is just tell me what to do. And engagement is like, hold on, let me think about it. Do I want to do this? Do I think it'll be useful? Do I think I can be successful? Do I trust you? So people are grappling with this change they didn't choose. And sometimes that looks like resistance.
So my first thing I'm doing is I'm not labeling them as a resistant teacher, the person who's experiencing resistance.
Yes.
Right? Because
Step
it's
one.
Something that happens to all of us, and that makes sense. It's how we respond. But what are other ways as a coach I might view the situation?
We want to view it as, we want to ask the question. We want to get curious. We want to shift out of that. Sometimes it can be frustrating working with someone that just won't do the thing. And sometimes our brain can go into judgment about it, like, oh, they should just do it, right? And we want to shift into curiosity. We want to ask a question, and they're making a statement, right? And so the question is, what do they need? What do they need support in? Because resistance is caused by one thing, and it's unmet needs.
So if we ask them what do they need, it opens them up to a conversation, and it's not a directive coaching, it's facilitative in that, okay, what do you need in order for you to feel comfortable with this, or whatever their unmet need is, we're meeting them there.
Yeah, that's
I'm told by my principal, I want these PLCs to work in this way, A, B, and C, and this is the protocol, and that ELA team, man, they just won't do it. They're experiencing resistance because they gave me 5 different excuses, and the principal is saying, I want it. And I have to ask them, what do they need?
Sometimes we ask the people, and sometimes we ask ourselves.
Okay.
Because most of the time people don't know.
Interesting.
They just know they don't want to do it.
Asking the leader, coach, principal, whoever it is, who's dealing with teachers with resistance, who are experiencing resistance, right?
Yeah.
Right.
We want them to put themselves in the teacher's shoes.
Yeah.
Right. Like to walk a mile in their steps and ask the question, why are they experiencing resistance? I got to change my mindset, change
your language,
my thinking, change my language, Jason, right? Fix your face. But to walk a mile in their shoes and really start to get introspective. Okay, what are the things they need? And maybe sometimes we do want to ask them if we know we have a teacher, man, I know there's resistance here. What do you need? Really diagnosing that.
One thing that's really important, like how do we figure out what their unmet need is? I'll tell you the 5 needs people have that are unmet that cause resistance. But before I do that, the skill that we need to figure this out is listening. We need to have high quality listening. And that means we need to not listen to the voice in our head, right? Like all of those thoughts about what they're saying, we have to quiet that and we have to listen to what they're saying. Because we have to hear not only what they're saying, but most of the time it's what's underneath what they're saying.
I like that. It's listening to learn and not listening to respond, right? Like
exactly it.
They're expressing something. I need to hear, pull the arrow out of my quiver and fire the next dart.
So you just teased us with 5, what were they?
Unmet needs.
Give us, what are those 5 unmet needs that you said?
So the 5 unmet needs are, folks need to find value in the change. They need to feel that they belong. They need to believe they can succeed in this change and also believe they can improve and be messy in a safe way, that they're safe to make mistakes. And last, they need to believe that if they actually take responsibility, that changes will actually happen and that they're allowed to make changes.
So I'm listening.
To learn.
They have to value the change. To see that what the thing adds value to what they're doing. It will help my students. It will help me. That belonging, that they're part of it. Maybe that they have voice in it, that they're among the people, that this is they're part of the team. It's not happening to them.
Yeah, exactly.
They have to believe they can succeed. Now that's interesting because I've worked with people. So I teach the newcomers to ELS, right?
Yeah.
And often they will say, that's great what you're teaching, but what you want me to do, but not with my students. So as a coach, I have to think about that mindset. How can I help them believe what I'm asking them to do will impact those students? Because that's a concern that teacher has.
Yep.
They can make mistakes. It's okay if it goes wrong. And that's part of the learning.
Yeah.
That's a huge mindset. That's hard to accept. And they take responsibility. What does that mean?
When a change is happening, this is a big one in schools that goes unnoticed and untalked about. There are times that coaches and leaders want teachers to use their professional judgment. Like, take this new math curriculum and make it your own.
Make it your own.
And then leaders don't want teachers to use their professional development. There are non-negotiables. I need you to do this.
Right.
You don't have a voice in this. It goes unarticulated most of the time.
And
But
so,
if we look at these 5 and anticipate ahead of time, you can almost take care of that in the moment. I know this is going to be hard, and I know it might not go so well the first or second time you do this. That's fine. I think of the Ted Lasso quote, taking on a challenge is a lot like riding a horse, isn't it? If you're comfortable while you're doing it, you're probably doing it wrong. Something like that, right? And so I'm okay with the uncomfortability. So you need to be okay with it too. We're going to take the excuses off the table. This is a best practice. You can anticipate it ahead of time if you think about these 5 areas where teachers are going to potentially bite back.
Yeah.
can you give an example of what this looks like in action when you've seen a coach working with a teacher and there's been a misdiagnosis and what the result is, and maybe an alternative approach, right? What it would look like to really take that time to try to think through these things, what that might look like in action?
For sure. I'm going to tell you about a time I misdiagnosed someone.
Good.
I was working with this very passionate science teacher years and years ago. She taught a heavily ELL group of children. She had lowered the rigor so much for them. Her belief was she had a word bank, and she was teaching high school. And she had a lot of fill in the blank sentences and then a word bank, right? She had lowered the rigor so much, like a third grader could probably. So I was brought in to help her and the coach make an impact here. And I'm a consultant, so I fly in to help her. There's high stakes in this. I'm here. Let's do a thing. So I show up and I think, oh, she just needs more strategies. She doesn't know. It's just a skill gap. Oh, she doesn't know how to scaffold for English language learners and that they're intelligent. A language deficit is not an intelligence deficit, right?
Right.
So I go in and we talk about her students and what they need. And I give her suggestions on things she can do. And she kept meeting me with, oh yeah, super coach. I have my cape on and everything, right? And she kept saying, oh, these kids can't do it. These kids can't do that. Yeah. Right. And I imagine people listening are like, oh, I know, I've heard that before. And so I would go back and she would say, oh, these kids can't do it. And I would get her to do this, like a tiny thing. She would half-heartedly do it. And it was months of me flying in, oh, these kids can't do it, and leaving. And everyone was convinced she was being difficult. And
resistant.
I was like, I am not making a difference with this chick. What I realized was she didn't trust that I had her best intentions at heart. And she didn't trust my competence. It was a belonging issue, and trust is part of belonging. She didn't trust why I was there and that I could actually help her. The next time I came, I was like, we're going to stop the suggestion train. And I'm just going to ask her questions. And I started asking her what she liked about teaching. Like, how do you enjoy teaching science? And she lit up. She's like, I love doing experiments. And I was like, whoa, this is very different what you're describing than what's happening in the classroom. And I believe what had been happening probably for years was the kind of coaching and leadership in the school was trying to get her to teach in this certain way. And there was just this resistance battle. And when I listened to her, I was like, oh, there's another way here where she can teach in a way that lights her up and benefits her students. And I did what's called mutual purpose. And that's one of the tools and strategies when you're building belonging. You get what's important to them. I certainly brought what was important to me, which was rigor. High school students need to be learning high school material at a high school level. She came back the next week. She's like, They did it. They learned. Look at their work. She's like shoving their work in my face. And I finally saw the high school students writing and thinking on a high school level.
So mutual purpose.
Yep.
So you learned what her purpose was or what was important to her,
Yep.
what mattered to
Yep.
her.
Yep.
And you took time that was the change that you made.
Yeah.
Was taking time to think through that.
And bringing what's important to me. Because
Right.
people get
Not
a little
compromising.
lost. It's not abandoning what is important to the school and the goals and the leadership team. We don't abandon that. We stop and we listen what's important to them and bring what's important to us.
As I listened to your example, I'll be honest, another example came to my head. That's what you were talking about, how sometimes we have thoughts while we're listening and you gotta have to accept that. But there's another example. I was working with a teacher and I felt as if every suggestion I gave, her response was, I do that. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on your experience. What's behind that response? Other than they might actually be true. They might actually already do that.
There's multiple reasons why they might be saying that. One behavior doesn't necessarily point to one motivation. Just like with students, right? If a student's disruptive in class, there's multiple reasons why that student could be disruptive in class. Same with teacher behavior, right? So a teacher could be saying, I already do that because they are comfortable with how things are and they don't want to disrupt being in their comfort zone. Another reason why is they might actually think they're doing it. It's an awareness gap.
Right.
They might think they're actually doing it, right? Or it might be a strategy to get out of changing because they don't value the actual change.
Right.
Kind of the three.
Or not clear, or I'm not clear about what the change is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, when a teacher like that says that, right? They are not inviting me into their classroom. So what I try to do is like, oh my, that is so awesome. You're doing it. Would you mind if I came and saw?
Right.
And treating them as the expert, right? Like really want to see that in action.
Yeah.
Judging it and then asking a question. If they're not doing it, then helping them recognize that they're not doing it. But through questions and getting them to realize that wasn't it. You might, but it wasn't. That's not going to have a person be very coachable.
So another thing that we hear a lot in coaching and leadership, you need to build buy-in. You have to build buy-in. My first goal when I started this school as a leader is to build buy-in with my teachers and get them behind me. So if I can build buy-in by having them do X, Y, and Z, I'll be successful. What are your thoughts on buy-in?
My thoughts are we need to go beyond buy-in. It's not enough. So when we think about engaging teachers, right, there's a continuum I like to share called the levels of engagement. It was not created by me. It was created by Dr. Chris Jones. I'm going to kind of go through each one briefly so you can hear how engagement starts and where it ends on this continuum. We start with sabotage, where someone is taking down the initiative. Defiance is I am passive with it. You tell me to change. I go back to my classroom and do my own thing. Compliance, which is just tell me what to do. Then we have buy-in, which is I, the leader, got you, the teacher, to do what I want you to do. Right? And then there's ownership right next to it. They're next door neighbors on this continuum. And the distinction between buy-in and ownership, the distinction is ownership requires a sense of agency. Teachers need to actually have some voice and choice in the change and believe that they can make meaningful change with their students if they don't experience that. And by the way, agency is both internal, I internally believe it, and external. The environment actually allows me to make changes, to implement the way I want to implement. And part of agency is I know where I'm allowed to use my professional judgment and where I'm not. And that confusion in itself, like I believe in schools, teachers have more agency than they realize. We kind of have a permission culture a lot of times where teachers think they need permission to do things that they don't need permission for.
So that distinction between buy-in and ownership, the distinction is when a teacher feels that they have agency and believe that they can make a meaningful change. And what you said is a change with students, right? So the coach or the principal asked me to do something. set up a lesson plan or have a certain strategy, I believe I can make a meaningful change. That strategy is going to work. You're saying that they have to believe that strategy is going to work, but do they also have to believe that they can make decisions about how they do it and what in their classroom?
They need to know where they are allowed to use their own judgment in making changes.
Clarity around what is flexible and what is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And being purposeful about that. You're saying you'll see greater success when teachers have more clarity.
Having ownership is the belief that by being responsible, I can change things. And the only way I can fully take responsibility is if I have some stake in this game. If I am allowed to make some kind of professional judgment in this.
I think about this district I work with, and forever they were using this term of, you've got to teach this with Fidelity. They're doing checklist type things. And the teachers had no ownership whatsoever. And so finally, we just a shift of language, and I can't remember where I got it. But the second I heard it, I'm like, I like that language. He's like, we're going to teach this with integrity. And when I started shifting it, helping them shift that language, and we shifted it, all of a sudden the teachers started to, and it required a layer of trust too. The district had to trust. There was a reason they were teaching with Fidelity, right? Because teachers go rogue sometimes. So they're like, we didn't want you to do the curriculum we bought, right? But now we want to say that we trust you to make good decisions. All the ownership grew, the teacher ownership grew because that word Fidelity said, we don't trust you. The word integrity said, we trust you to make good decisions. And we're empowered to do that.
The thing about the levels of engagement is sometimes if someone's in defiance, going to compliance is actually better. Sometimes.
Right, sure.
We need to understand what I love about the level.
It's a continuum.
It's a continuum. Sometimes the compliance, that's not the end goal, but seeing growth like, ooh, we shifted from I'm not going to do it to I'll do it if you make me. But sometimes that's like, ooh, we have growth here. What I want people to get is when we set things up, like a leader chooses the change and says you have to do it, the best we can get is buy-in. That is the absolute best we can do. And we can set ourselves up to do better and to have ownership.
And you think moving from buy-in to ownership is important?
You know how when we talk about teachers in a classroom, when they're facilitating, it's less work on the teacher, like the kids are working harder than the teacher. The same thing with coaching and leadership. When we give teachers ownership, us as leaders and coaches, we are working less hard.
Yeah.
Because we're giving people a sense of responsibility and I can change things. We're no longer have to be the professional reminderers. Did you do it? Remember, right? Like, remember lesson plans, right? Because people are finally taking initiative. They're working with each other, supporting each other. They are bringing it up in PLCs instead of us bringing it up in PLCs.
But we should start with ownership. Like I see, obviously I don't want to start at sabotage, but I don't necessarily, are you saying I don't want to start with, let's help them be compliant? Then it's not a staircase, right? It's a level that they come to. Like, I'm just trying to think about, like, from a practical, I'm a coach at the school, and I'm trying to think about how I'm going to use this concept of levels of engagement.
I see it, Danielle, correct me if I'm wrong, but as the teachers are somewhere on that continuum, right? From the beginning, different teachers are in different places. And my job as a leader is to move them towards ownership. And the first move might be from
defiance.
Defiance, one of the lowest levels, to compliance. But ultimately, I'm going to celebrate when they move there, but I'm not going to be content. I'm going to try to continue to move them towards ownership. Some teachers might be already super high on the continuum. I want to use them as champions and as mentors for those too and bring them on board.
Ownership means, like, you can always, even if they're at, you can still push ownership because you can still say, I'll make a decision. I want you to, this is the thing we're asking you to do, and this is the expectation, but please tell us how you would do it. You're like, what adjustments would you make? how does this work in your context? And then celebrate that, right? Which is don't focus on what they're doing wrong, but focus on and celebrate and highlight any time that they make it real for them.
Yeah, I've totally worked with teachers where I've taken them from defiance straight to ownership. And we were alluding to this earlier, the catalyst mindsets. Those 5 unmet needs that people have that we can use to diagnose are actually mindsets. And when we use the catalyst mindset as a framework to diagnose resistance, that framework is what brings people into ownership. When we use those 5 mindsets to diagnose, we have a chance at getting people into ownership. Unfortunately, what's happening in schools is we use compliance-driven accountability. We use strategies that at best could get people into compliance and maybe buy-in. But I wrote a book called The Resistance Solution, and it is literally about let's use strategies that actually speak to people's humanity, a human-centered approach to change it so that we can understand what's going on with them and aim for ownership.
So you talked about mindsets and different mindsets. And I was in a school one time where the leader said, the problem with our school is we don't have a growth mindset. I want you to teach my teachers how to have a growth mindset. What you've said in your work is we need to go past growth mindset. What does that mean? And what are those mindsets that go past growth?
We need to go beyond growth mindset. And this is what's happened in schools, right? Carol Dweck read the book, Mindset, and we were like, that's it. I've done a lot of research around why it has caught fire so much. And I don't know if you remember the grit era where F4 came out with that research, like what children need is grit. And we were like, grit, right? We beat children over the head. We're like, you just need more grit. And we realized, oops, that was a little simplistic. We need more, right? So we stopped doing the grit thing. And then growth mindset came out at a time where it's fertile ground for we need hope. I was like, how did this catch fire so quickly? And it was we needed hope around helping children. I think we were kind of deep in the No Child Left Behind accountability era. So we all were like growth mindset, and me included. I was a teacher. I had the growth mindset chart up. We referred to it all the time. We were like, not yet, right? And so when I became a coach, I started to realize, I was like, there's something missing here. Growth mindset isn't enough. Sometimes, what is growth mindset? Growth mindset is a belief I can improve with effort and different strategies. Okay. And if I believe I can improve, only helps sometimes. It's what I call put blinders on us. And we're using one tool to solve everything. Once in a while, someone does need support around believing they can improve. But there's other reasons why learners can be stuck and why teachers can be resisting. There's 4 other reasons why. And what's interesting is those growth mindset researchers, I worked with them. They kept doing research around mindsets. People just don't know about it. So the catalyst mindsets, this framework is those 5 mindsets. Growth mindset, we need growth mindset. I believe I can improve. Success mindset is I believe I can be successful. The distinction between the two is success mindset is I believe the outcome can happen. Growth mindset is I believe it's safe to be in the process of improvement. And success mindset is the same thing as self-efficacy. So we have value mindset. I believe this has value for me. So this is where the change is useful to me. Maybe it solves a problem that I'm having. I believe this can help my students. It has meaning, relevance, purpose in it. Belonging mindset is I believe I belong here. This is where trust, connection, and safety comes in. And then the last one is ownership mindset. I believe that by taking responsibility, I can change things. And we talk quite a bit around what ownership is. When folks are resisting, we can use this framework to diagnose what's happening. And I like to use the analogy of what we do with students when they're struggling to read. Like Susie comes to class, she's having a hard time reading. We don't say, hey, Susie, use this reading strategy. We never do that. We know that's bad practice. We assess what she needs to be successful. We stop, we diagnose, we do something, right? With teachers, unfortunately, we do something very different. We use one strategy, right? Not thinking about what is actually causing this resistance. But when we stop and we listen for what's actually unsupported, we can use a strategy that meets that need and not just a random strategy.
How does thinking about these mindsets with a teacher change how you're approaching? I heard you say you're going to try different things based on the different types of mindsets you're hearing. Once you own these, think about growth, success, value, belonging, and ownership. How does that change your interaction with a teacher or a group of teachers?
It changes how you listen.
Okay.
You're not listening. You no longer are listening for proof that they're resistant.
That they're experiencing resistance.
We're not listening for how do I make them do it? We're listening for those 5 needs. Do they not value it? Do they not trust me? Do they not believe they can belong? Do they not believe they can be successful? We're asking questions to unearth which need is unsupported instead of making statements about what needs to happen next, which is often compliance.
Interesting. Listening for success. What might I be listening for?
So success mindset, which is self-efficacy, has 2 elements to it. One is outcome clarity and one is attainability beliefs. So outcome clarity is I actually know for sure what the desired outcome is. So for example, I'm being asked to implement an engagement strategy. That part of success mindset is I know what that engagement strategy looks like. If someone doesn't believe they can do it, it's because they actually aren't clear about what it is, right? Yes. We're like, it's easy, just try it. And they're like, oh no, I can't. These kids can't do it, right? That's often one of the telltale signs of a success mindset. So sometimes they actually don't know what success looks like.
Yeah.
And so I'm listening for, do they know what it looks like?
If I'm a person who lives in success mindset and I don't feel like I can be successful at the thing that telling me that you want me to do, I'm going to experience resistance, or I'm going to feel like that's what I value. So you're saying if that's my mindset, if I'm really worried that I'm not going to be successful maybe the first time or second time, I'm really going to struggle with it. Is that kind of like, that's the thing? Is it a value proposition? Like that's what matters to me?
Oh, you're actually naming 2 mindsets. Yeah. They're all connected. It's super fair to say, right? They're super interconnected.
I see value there.
So that was value mindset and success mindset, and they are very much related and interconnected. Part of value is I value looking competent.
Right.
I just that as a teacher, I value looking competent.
Yep.
Also the belief that I will be or won't be successful, right? There's 2 pieces of that. If I hear, oh, these kids can't do it, half the time when I'm meeting with the teacher, as I'm talking them through whatever the strategy is, I'll get no kids. I'll get up and I'll just model as I'm talking through the strategy. Like they are non-consensually getting modeled for. And I'm making sure that they actually know what success looks like. We need to make sure we are talking about the same thing. And then the second piece is, once I'm clear, you know what success looks like. Do you believe you can get there? Attainability belief.
Attainability belief.
Right. Mm-hmm. And these are all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when they work together?
The mindsets?
Yeah. That's what I look at. These are interconnected. And when they all work together, something magical happens.
Oh, I just got chills when you said that. We can support one need, it tends to take care of the rest of them. If I can name what's valuable to this teacher and I give them what they need, that access, value mindset, often they're open in their success mindset.
Right.
It builds trust.
It's cool.
As we close our conversation, a lot of things you've talked about connect to each other. I've heard the idea of ownership in terms of ownership is a level of engagement. Ownership is a mindset. Taking responsibility of what you're doing as a belief. So that's something as a coach I can remind myself as I'm developing a plan is how am I going to build teacher ownership into what I'm doing? I'm hearing you talk a lot about valuing what the teacher is bringing to the table and making sure that is surfaced and thought about, valued and honored. I'm hearing you talk about clarity. I really think what you said about being clear, what is rigid and where do you have space to make it your own? I really appreciate that first thing we talked about, which is you're not a resistant teacher. That's not who you are. You're experiencing an emotion and a thought and a feeling that is common to all of us and that we all experience in various times in our lives. And being empathetic about that is super important. Jason, anything I missed? Anything big ideas you heard that really resonated for you?
So much of this conversation is rolling around in my head, but even just from the very beginning of a resistant teacher versus dealing with a teacher who's experiencing resistance, right? Like in that shift in my will is already causing me to think through conversations I've had in the past and am going to have in the future. And then layering on top of that, these mindsets supporting resistant. There's a lot there. I can't wait for your book to come out. Can you talk about your book? Tell us the title, where we might be able to get it, when we might be able to get it. Other than our conference, if you come to our conference, we will have copies of the book there. Becca will sign them for you. But yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, my book is called The Resistance Solution: Why Educators Resist and What They Need Instead. The book is literally, the first 3 chapters are why I really go into why resistance happens and the roots of resistance, because I think we really need to get our hands around what is happening here. Why is resistance happening? And then the next 5 chapters are, each chapter is a mindset. And in each chapter, I give you what the mindset is and those elements of the mindset. I give you a tool for the mindset. I show you that tool in action. Sometimes I share what people are doing out in real life. And I also share a silent progress blocker, which is in our schools. Now, the research I was doing, I was like, the way we do school, we accidentally, unconsciously create resistance. And each mindset has a silent progress blocker. A way we do school, quote unquote, actually gets in the way of us supporting these mindsets. And we need to be able to name it so we can tame it. If we can name it, we can tame it.
We can tame it.
Yep.
I mean, if you have a rhyme and a slogan, you are good to go. So you got yours. I love it. You name it, you can tame it.
Yeah. So
can you give us an example of a progress blocker?
The belonging mindset silent progress blockers are culture of niceness. And this is where we value harmony over authenticity. And we would rather avoid conflict instead of talking about the elephant in the room. And it keeps us from making a real impact with our educators and our students, because we hear things like kill them with kindness. That is an actual strategy that coaches tell other coaches to use. I hear it all the time. That is the opposite of what we want, because belonging does not come from niceness. It comes from authenticity.
I feel like I thought we were describing my personal life and my personal relationships with like 3 different people for a second. So I had to reflect.
Danielle's pre-ordering the book.
Yeah, not even for school. I can cancel my therapist.
Get the book.
And you're getting to the heart of it.
What happens when people learn the Catalyst mindsets is they go home and they end up using it. Often I hear of their teenagers. They're like, my relationship with my teenager's gotten better.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
It's for all humans.
That's what coaching is. Relationship game. It's a give and take of listening and finding what that person wants, what they need, but also connecting that to a greater goal, a clear purpose. And I think this makes that clear. So we excited to see your session at the conference. You'll be opening our coaching community. They're going to be kicking us off. We're very excited to learn about these concepts.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to reach out to you, do you have an email that you
Sure. You could reach out directly to me at Becca at thewholeeducator.com. And if you want to check out anything that I have or my work, it's thewholeeducator.com. When the book pre-order comes out, I will be emailing my mailing list. So if you want to get on the newsletter, head to my website, thewholeeducator.com, get on the newsletter. And of course, the book will be available on Amazon when it comes out.
A lot of cool resources on her website too, on thewholeeducator.com. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Cool resources.
Well, thank you. We will see you in Nashville.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. SREB is a nonprofit dedicated to improving education from pre-K all the way to PhD and into the workforce. Visit sreb.org for resources on instructional practices, teacher data, career pathways, and more. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook at SREB-School Improvement and on Twitter/X and Instagram, both at SREB Education. See you next week.